Welcome back. Let's start talking about these tools and how they work. Then we'll get into how these little bad boys work. And this is really the reason for using the select and mask is the edge detection and then the refinement settings. This allows you to mask out hair or mask around hair much more cleanly. The alternative to this, and this is something if you get deep into the professional field of photographic pre-prep, then you're going to end up doing this a lot. The alternative to this is using channels to actually create selections. And we'll touch on this later in the semester in about 8 or so projects. We'll be back to masks. We'll keep touching on them. Just one of the reasons we're spending so much time on it right now. So the first two tools on the bottom, I suppose I should say the last two tools on the bottom make the most sense. It's just a zoom tool, zoom in, dragging in one direction, drag left, zoom out, right, in, up, out, down, in, all that good stuff. So if you just click and play with it, makes total sense. Hand tool, if you click on the hand tool, allows you to move around so you can see what's going on. Great, fantastic. So perfect sense. Let's go ahead and see if we can deselect this. We can. Control D will essentially erase your entire mask and bring you back to where you were. I'm going to zoom out using clicks instead. Alt will, just toggle over to the minus. Plus we'll zoom in, alt, zoom out, all that good stuff. I'm going to turn off scrubby zoom. I'm just not a fan. I don't really see a reason for it. With scrubby zoom off, you can just draw the window you want and we'll zoom into that window. I think that's much more useful. All right, going over this, you can see that this would be a tricky one to mask. We've got similar colors between the main, especially in those areas. You can see that we have similar values if you squint your eyes between the green and the yellow over here. You can see that we've got these fine hairs, which would be a pain to simply paint in. So this is definitely one to work with within the refined masks. Now, the select and mask. So let's start with taking the quick selection tool. We also have the brush tool. We could just take the brush tool. Actually, let's do that. We'll start with the brush tool, and we'll just make this quite big using the right bracket key, and then boop, 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 get a big chunk of the background in here. Doop, doop, doop. And then over here, you notice I missed the corner. What if I hadn't noticed that? What if you're sitting there going, oh, Professor, the corner, you missed the corner. Well, what I would do when I'm working through this is quickly switch over to on black. Oh no, we can see immediately that I missed it. Not a problem now. So I'm just going to go in, keep painting this in, just kind of do a rough one. In fact, I can just paint using on black entirely if I want, but then it's kind of working blind, which is a pain. You bring down the opacity of the black. Again, it's still so backwards, but whatever. We'll bring down the opacity of the black, which will allow us to paint in the line. Now, what if I need to flip this? Well, the brush tool, weirdly enough, is like a selection, so I can switch it to minus, and that will let me just paint that in. If I want more details, I can go in there. Now, we're going to talk about this later in the semester, but take note, notice these little bumples that are occurring where you have these little dots. There's a smoothing option inside a normal brush that allows you to take care of that, which is actually why it's better to start with a brush on a layer mask, then switch to the select and mask and do refinements. We'll talk about that later in the semester too, but I figured it's a good point to, good idea to bring that up now. So let's go ahead and just keep painting. All right, and we've got the lion kind of roughly painted in here. Let's say we want that smoother. I'm going to click Z to get to this zoom tool. I'm going to drag in. I'm going to press B to get the brush tool. Again, I'm just going to use the left bracket real quick. As it gets smaller, it will be easier to paint in. Here we go. Just switch that around. All right, so we've got kind of a good start here. As you get down to this line, though, there's got to be better tools, right? Well, let's switch back real quick to the marching ants. See, we have the wrong thing selected, though. When we toggle over to the on layer, we've got it backwards. So not a problem. Control Shift and I will flip it. Bam. Now we've got the lion on the background. That's more what we wanted. Fantastic. Switch back to the marching ants. So let's look at the other tools. We can brush. It's great for big work, but you can see it's starting to get tedious as we're getting into the refined stuff here. That's not a problem. You have something called quick selection, and the quick selection allows you, and I'm going to use the subtract here, allows you to just drag across, and just like the Wand Tool's companion of quick selection, it will automatically press it down. That, I think, is much easier for when we start getting to this level than sitting there and painting. Let me go ahead and subtract that away. Get around. And as with the magnetic lasso tool, it pivots in. That's just something that we have to live with. We won't worry about that too much because we have more tools that we will use in a minute to do refinement. Okay. So if you try to sit here and get the hair and the whiskers and all of that stuff, you're going to get the big chunks of background and you'll start to go crazy. So don't even worry about that right now. We've got more tools at our disposal. So I'm just getting a nice chunk so that I don't have to do a whole lot of work in a minute, but not so much that I drive myself crazy. And you'll get a good feel for that as you work on this assignment if you include hairy things. Now, including hairy things is not a requirement for this assignment, so if you find yourself short on time and you just need to work with like mechanical things and buildings, that's fine too. Don't worry about that. And we'll talk more about the assignment once we finish demoing all these tools. All right, perfect. This is a great start, actually. So I'm going to take the zoom, the magnifying tool, hold down the Alt key and click a couple times so that I can get out here. Yeah, this looks pretty good. I like that. All right. All right, so if we were to pop this on black, I always click black and white instead. On black, crank this up to full opacity, then we can see a rough start of a mask. So what's so great about this? This wasn't any easier to get the hair than anything else. Well, we have this tool right here called Refine Edge and its companion tools over here called Edge Detection. So what is an edge in the context of this window? If we were to click this button right here, this little checkbox right here, Show Edge, we'll see something kind of strange. Nothing. It just went black. What's that about? Well, if we increase the radius, notice that if I really crank it up to something ridiculous, notice that it kind of smoothed things out a little bit. Well, that's great, but what did that? What's going on? Click Show Edge when we have a radius. We have a 1 pixel radius right now. The selection in the middle now has essentially a concept of 1 pixel. So that concept is going to be used, it's such a weird term, that's not a great term for it, but that 1 pixel area right here is going to be used by Photoshop to do refinements like finding hair. So that edge is just going in and out of our selection. It's literally the edge of our selection. So crank it up to 4 pixels, start seeing something, crank it up kind of high, like 35 pixels. Now this starts getting interesting. Look at that. We've got all of the rims of the hair. I'm seeing I have a spot that I need to take care of, so let me stop showing edges real quick, and I'll just come in with a brush tool. Whoops. And I will flip that around. Get rid of that one little spot. Now if we pop back to, and notice that with the brush tool, you don't have option to show the edge. You need to be over on something that works with the edge, such as the quick selection, the Refine Edge tool, I believe not the lasso tool, I'm wrong about that one. So just the top 2 tools, the quick selection and the Refine Edge tool. Press Show Edge. Whoops. Just going to Alt click a whole bunch of times and get out there. Now notice that it dropped the radius back down, so I'm going to crank this back up. And it's trying to pick out the edge. So great, but what's that going to do for us? Well, with the Refine Edge tool here, the Refine Edge brush tool, let me take off the Show Edge, we can do something really cool. I'm going to zoom in real quick. This is trying to guess where the hair is. We take that brush tool and we start painting in the hair, or conversely, with the subtraction, painting out the background. It starts to try to drag in and understand where the edges are. And it does a decent job of doing that if you let it work with the other tools. So for example, I have the subtraction tool here and I'm drawing in here and nothing's happening. This isn't an edge, so it can't refine it down. But if I take the brush tool and come in and then subtract away here, and then add in a little bit, now this has an edge. which means if I use the Refine Edge tool on here, it starts to figure out what I'm talking about. So you use it in conjunction with two things. Look at that. It grabbed the whisker. If you start to use it in conjunction with other tools, you can quickly clean up loose strands of hair and bring them in, which would be such a pain otherwise. So I'm just pressing X to see what it looks like normally, and that should be over here. Well, I guess they don't have it in here anymore. They used to have it in here as a view control. Guess they killed it. Let's see. Yes, I guess not. Guess that's gone. Well, it's still there by KeyCommand. You also reset the workspace. Don't press that button. That'll get rid of all of the hard work you've done up till now. So let me pane out. And here, you notice that this just takes some time. So I'm going to draw a little edge going around. And maybe that's too much. Well, that's not a problem. I can paint some more back in. And now it's probably time to refine this edge because it seems to be having problems grasping what I'm clicking on. So I'm going to go in with the Refine Edge tool. And again, we can show that edge. Crank up that radius. See what's going on. You see it's got the edge of the whiskers now, but it doesn't have the edge down here because I haven't worked on it. So if I turn off Show Edge, I can come in and start adding in the edge at the actual edge of the selection. And you can see that it's very slowly but surely painting it in. So it's still kind of a pain. It's kind of how life is sometimes. There are actually faster ways of doing this using the channels, and we will cover that later in the semester. For now, we're just going to use this one. And we're just going to paint in around the lion. And so I'm going to subtract out a little bit. And that seems to have erased his entire face, so I'm going to undo with Control-Z. If I need to go back further, you just Control-Z a couple more times and you guys will be fine. I'm in legacy mode for my Control-Z, so I need to Control-Alt-Z. Anyone on versions prior to 2019 will need to Control-Alt-Z to go back. So we start refining in the lion's hair using the Refine Edge tool. And then you just work on it. So this will take a while. I don't think you guys really need to watch me do this part. So I'm going to go ahead and use some movie magic to cut ahead to when this mask is already completed. And again, I'm just doing this technique all the way down. And that's all I'm doing. When I get to a rough spot, it's not a problem. I will just go in with the brush tool instead. Sorry, the brush tool instead, and I will paint it in where needed. And subtract out also where necessary. So I can help along the refined edge by essentially pushing the edges. All right, I'm going to go ahead and use some movie magic, and then we'll talk about what Smart Radius does. So movie magic. All right, so here we have it a little further along. You can see that it's grabbed some of the whiskers. It's still a little rough in a lot of areas. And it would be nice if there was some way for it to kind of determine the difference between an area that's supposed to be fairly smooth and an area that's supposed to have these refined hairs and things in. Well, fortunately there is. It's called Smart Radius. So if we increase the radius a little bit on here, getting a few more pixels, we see that it starts grabbing the hair a little bit better as we go in. Ah, look how cleanly it's picked up those whiskers now. Looked at that. But you can see that in some areas it's getting kind of choppy. If we turn on Smart Radius, it should now start to figure out that some areas need to be thinner and some areas need to be thicker. And by areas, I mean some areas of the edge that's been painted in. And so if we keep with the show edges on for just a second, we can now kind of paint in and see that what I'm doing with my mouse is a little bit different from what's actually occurring on the screen. Zoom in. It looks like it's having some problems keeping up with me, so I'm going to turn off show edges for a second, turn it back on. Yeah, it's starting to have some problems. So let's look at a couple of other things real quick before it completely glitches out. We have global refinements, and these are a little more straightforward. Smoothing literally just smooths the selection, trying to figure out the thresholds between what you've selected and what's not selected. Feather just softens things up, and this is especially nice on some hairy areas. Right now we're just going to leave this alone, and I'll explain why in a minute. You can see we're going to need that in the hair, but I'll show you why we're going to leave that alone. We have contrast, and increase of the contrast is essentially doing it on the show if we were to show edges, but mine's just gone crazy. We'll leave it alone. It's essentially darkening. You can see how it's getting choppy. It's getting rid of any of the smoother parts. It's turning the grays either to black or to white, depending on what kind of grays that they have. And we have shift edges, which we can get to by bringing things in or bringing things out. You can see it flying out a little bit more. Just going to leave it at 0 for now. If you ever wanted to know what something does, just crank it all the way up in one direction and crank it all the way down in the other direction. And you can see immediately how it's really behaving. And then you can make your decisions from there. All right. So we have output settings. And by default, don't click to decontaminate colors just yet. I'm going to talk about that on the next video. We have choices to output to layer mask. We can make a new layer. We can make a new layer with a layer mask. We can make a new document. We can make a new document with a layer mask. We'll talk about all those when we talk about decontaminate colors. For now, I'm going to do layer mask. I'm going to tell it OK. Boom. We can see that we now, if I actually. References tools. Let's enter selected mask. If you double click this, you bring up the properties or the layer mask. I forgot that was an option on here. I actually wanted to alt click. We could see what we have so far. Sure enough, it's made pretty intelligent guess. This kind of looks like hair in a lot of areas. So next up, let's take a look at what decontaminate color means and what all those output settings were on our next video.